Hi everyone, thank you for joining in for today's webinar. I just wanted to introduce myself. So I am Abby, I'm an accredited practicing dietitian. I work in private practice for a multidisciplinary clinic, Rebound Health, located on Sydney's Northern Beaches. I have a special interest in all things gut health and IBS, and am trained with Monash University in the FODMAP diet for IBS management. For this year's Celiac Awareness Week, I will be presenting today on celiac disease versus IBS and delving into the difference between the two conditions. So I will be chatting through all things what the conditions are, common features, symptoms, and management approaches for the two, and how to go about getting a diagnosis of celiac disease or IBS. So first, I'm going to start off with IBS, which is an acronym for irritable bowel syndrome. IBS is what we call a functional gastrointestinal disorder. So this means that there is a presence of chronic gastrointestinal symptoms, so digestive symptoms, without any pathological cause. So there's no real conventional tests, say like blood tests, ultrasounds, internal investigations, that can detect any organic or real medical cause. However, many of us with IBS would know that these symptoms can very well be quite debilitating and impact on daily life. We are now starting to understand a little more about IBS and realizing that IBS is a disorder of the gut-brain connection. So our brain and our gut or digestive tract are in constant communication with each other, sending signals to and from. The perfect example of this is when we are feeling nervous or anxious, maybe prior to a job interview, a big race, or an exam, and we might feel a bit queasy or that sense of butterflies in our tummy. So for some, this might even be rushing to the bathroom as well. So this is that gut-brain communication occurring. When it comes to IBS, this connection becomes really heightened and the gut can be highly sensitive. Often general digestive processes like bloating, fermentation, or fermentation of fibers in the gut can trigger heightened symptoms in the gut. Some other common features of IBS include altered gut motility, so the speed of fluids and food passing through the gut. This can either speed up or be slowed right down. Often there can also be an imbalance of bacteria in the gut, so perhaps this is a reduction in beneficial bacterial species and more harmful bacteria, or what we refer to as gut dysbiosis. This can be triggered by various factors like diet, antibiotic use, stress, or illness such as gastrobugs. So that is quite a common one. Whereas celiac disease does have a pathological cause. We know celiac disease is an autoimmune disease when the immune system reacts abnormally to gluten. When gluten is eaten, the immune system reacts and fights against this, causing inflammation and damage to the gut. So what happens, as you can see in this diagram, usually in the lining of the digestive tract, we have these finger-like projections. This is where all of our nutrients, so nutrition from our food, is absorbed. People with celiac disease, when gluten is eaten over time, inflammation causes these finger-like projections to flatten from that inflammation. And this often leads to nutrient deficiencies, for example, iron and B12 deficiency. If left untreated, this damage and inflammation can also increase risk of chronic nutrient deficiencies, so things like anemia, osteoporosis, infertility, liver disease, and gastric cancers. So there are quite serious health consequences if celiac disease is left untreated and there is that long-term exposure to gluten in the diet. So when it comes to symptoms, there definitely can be an overlap of symptoms. Common symptoms of IBS include abdominal pain, discomfort or cramping. We often see alternating bowel patterns. For some, this can be diarrhea and urgency. For others, this may be constipation, or quite commonly, we can get a mix of both, as well as excess gas and wind. Similarly, celiac disease can have similar symptoms of abdominal pain, discomfort, and cramping. They may have diarrhea or constipation, that excessive bloating as well. However, some other alarming features of celiac disease can be things like fatigue, nutrient deficiencies, and unexplained weight loss when we are not effectively absorbing that nutrition from our food. A lot of these symptoms can happen, with long-term gluten exposure. So it is important, still, if you are getting that change in bowel symptoms, bowel habits, to still have that screening. It could still be a sign of celiac disease, even if you don't feel like, you have that weight loss and nutrient deficiencies developed already. Therefore, when we are coming to a diagnosis, it is super important we differentiate between the two. So how are both conditions diagnosed? Unfortunately, there are no tests to diagnose IBS, so we need to make sure all other pathological causes of symptoms are ruled out. This is such as celiac disease and other conditions like inflammatory bowel disease. Often this includes blood tests, looking at iron levels, stool tests, looking at any bugs or parasites, inflammatory markers, and one of those key screening tests is our celiac screening conducted via a blood test. So it is essential to check in with your GP if you are experiencing these gut symptoms, because they can guide you through these relevant screening tests. Some people may also need to see a gastroenterologist for further investigation, such as colonoscopy and gastroscopy, so that internal investigation. Once all more serious causes of symptoms are ruled out, our symptoms are compared against a set criteria to come to a diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome. The celiac serology, this blood test measures antibody levels in the blood, which are typically elevated in people with celiac disease, due to the body's reaction to gluten. A positive blood test needs to be followed by a small bowel biopsy to confirm the diagnosis by a gastroenterologist. Celiac disease cannot be diagnosed by just the blood test alone, so it is important to know that biopsy is essential, and your gastroenterologist will guide you through that. One really important factor to note at the start of this process is that gluten must be eaten in the diet regularly for this screening test to detect these antibodies. Otherwise, it could be possible to get a false negative result. So when you are having these investigations with your GP, make sure you are regularly consuming gluten. If you have already eliminated gluten from your diet, we do actually need to do a gluten challenge, which includes consuming a minimum of 4 slices of bread each day or equivalent in that amount of gluten for at least 6 weeks prior to testing. So you can find more information on this gluten challenge on the Coeliac Australia website, which I have included some links at the end of this presentation. Or it is, a good idea to even check in with a dietitian, so an accredited practicing dietitian, if you're a bit concerned about that, particularly if you really do think gluten is causing you uncomfortable symptoms. It can be quite daunting to reintroduce it for that long. So they can talk you through, give you some advice on the best approach to that. So when it comes to management, there are various approaches to managing IBS based on your symptoms, your specific patterns, and triggers for your symptoms. Some various approaches include modifying dietary fiber intake and other common triggers like dietary fat, caffeine, fluids, and alcohol. The low FODMAP diet is an approach to managing IBS, which can be quite effective in about 70% of people. They can get quite good response from a low FODMAP diet. Stress management and mindfulness techniques. So particularly if that stress and anxiety is playing a massive role in your symptoms. Gut-directed hypnotherapy is another interesting approach to managing IBS. And then other things like probiotics, prebiotics, and really working on improving the balance of good, healthy, beneficial bacteria in the gut as well. So with these, working with a dietitian one-on-one can really help you determine your specific triggers and the best approach to management, particularly if it's something like the low FODMAP diet. That is not something that you want to do on your own. It's best to do that under the guidance of a FODMAP trained dietitian. And on the Monash website, They do actually have, so the Monash University website, I've included a link at the end of this presentation. They do actually have a dietitian directory of, a bunch of list of dietitians who are trained in the FODMAP diet for IBS management. So you could find someone, located in your area as well. And then when it comes to celiac disease, so celiac disease can be treated with following a strict lifelong gluten-free diet. So that is essential. Again, working one-on-one with a dietitian is essential at the start of your diagnosis to learn how to detect gluten in your foods, read food labels, prevent cross-contamination, and minimize any nutritional risks that may come with this major dietary change, because it is a massive, diet and lifestyle change. It is also important to identify and address any nutrient deficiencies. So whether this be, through food or supplementation, with the guidance of your dietitian. And some symptoms can also persist for some time after gluten is eliminated. So a dietitian can guide you through, the best approach to managing any digestive symptoms as well. So when it comes to gluten and its role in the management of these conditions, gluten is a protein found in wheat, rye, barley, and oats. This must be strictly avoided in celiac disease. Gluten can also play a role in symptoms for a very small group of people with non-celiac gluten sensitivity, where gluten may trigger digestive symptoms without this autoimmune reaction occurring. Another component to be aware of is fructans, which is a carbohydrate component in wheat, rye, and barley. This is separate to gluten. So some people with IBS can be sensitive to the fructan component of these foods, therefore feel better when removing wheat and gluten from their diet and opting for those gluten-free products. So this is not necessarily due to the gluten contained in these products. It may be because of this fructan component. So it is really best to work with a dietitian, one-on-one on an elimination and reintroduction process to determine what specific component it is that is triggering your symptoms. So they can definitely help you, guide you through that process, in cases like IBS, where it isn't that autoimmune celiac disease that is causing the reaction. So we may actually be able to expand your diet, because some foods, still contain gluten, but are low in fructans. So it can help with, adding more variety and expanding that diet as well, which is the ultimate goal. So anyways, that's all from me today. Thank you a lot for joining in and listening to today's webinar. I hope you've learned a few little tips, and, if you are feeling like you need that extra guidance, support, need some, further investigation, it's best to check in with, first point of call is your GP, and, a dietitian as well is always a good point of action, if you are looking at getting that celiac screening test. And yeah, I've included some extra resources here. The Coeliac Australia website has some wonderful resources, like I mentioned, that gluten challenge resource. The Monash University FODMAP website contains, lots of information on IBS, the FODMAP diet, and also that FODMAP dietitian directory as well. If you're looking for an accredited practicing dietitian to give you some extra support. And then the Free from Allergy show with lots of extra resources, recipes and things as well. And then, yeah, I've also included my contact details. I will just slide this up. So where you can get in contact with me if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out or want to get in touch. So I've included I'm practicing at Rebound Health. I've included our website there and my email address if you want to get in touch. And I've also included my personal dietitian Instagram handle here, where I tend to share lots of foodie tips and recipes. So feel free to reach out there as well. But yeah, thanks a lot for joining in today.